Gwenllian ferch Gruffydd was a woman who would defy convention as well as her enemies and would pass through into legend. As the only Welsh woman in medieval records to have faced her enemies in battle, her story would go on to inspire generations despite the horrific and unfair death she received in return. Much of what we know about Gwenllian is mired in legend, but we know she was born sometime between 1090 and 1100, the daughter of Prince Gruffydd ap Cynan of Gwynedd and Princess Angarad ferch Owain of Deheubarth. Her birthright bestowed upon her a rich heritage, linking her to powerful royal families of Wales. She was born and raised on Ynys Môn, now also known as Anglesey, the youngest of 8 children. From an early age, Gwenllian was exposed to the intricacies of ruling and warfare. Her father, Gruffydd ap Cynan, was a key figure in Welsh resistance to Norman rule and would fight for his throne no less than 4 times. The 12th century was a tumultuous period for Wales as the Normans sought to expand their dominion over the region. England was still under recent Norman rule, and Henry I, the youngest son of William the Conqueror, was now king. Having brought much of Anglo-Saxon England under their thumb, the Normans then looked to Wales. Gruffydd ap Cynan was starting to consolidate his rule in Gwynedd by 1101, and Henry I allowed him to maintain Llyn, Ifonydd, Ardudwy and Arlechwydd. However, by 1113, Gruffydd had created enough power for himself that Henry grew worried, and in 1114 the English king would invade. Faced with an overwhelming force, Gruffydd had no choice but to cede to the English king and pay homage in exchange for not losing any territory and living to fight another day. But the year before, in 1113, Prince Gruffydd ap Rhys of Deheubarth, heir of Rhys ap Tudur, had left exile in Ireland and visited Gwynedd. This was to try and engage his help against Henry I for his own lands, but while he was there, he would meet Gruffydd's daughter, Gwenllian. She was apparently a great beauty, as well as educated, intelligent, and to top it off, her father taught her proficiently how to use a sword. In short, she was more than a match for the prince, who fell instantly in love with her. The details of this romance are lost to time, but the couple eloped together and married before 1116. They would go on to have 8 children together, including Rhys ap Gruffydd, one of the most powerful Welsh rulers of the Middle Ages. Gwenllian moved to Dynevere Castle in Deheubarth, the region now known as South Wales, also becoming stepmother to Gruffydd's 2 children from a previous relationship. But Gwenllian did not sit at home knitting socks. Deheubarth at that time was struggling to dislodge Norman, English and even Flemish settlers intending to set up colonies within Wales. She would join her husband in his fight, the couple using guerrilla warfare to attack these colonies. The only thing more impressive than a woman fighting in the 12th century was the fact that Gwenllian would bring their children with her and was often pregnant at the time. This also meant that there was no settled home for the royal family, often hiding out in mountainous and forested regions. But it did mean the children would have seen firsthand what was needed to gain back the lands of their forefathers. The wealth gained from these raids were reportedly often distributed amongst the Welsh poor, making Gwenllian and Gruffydd a sort of pair of Robin Hoods. Due to the clandestine nature of their acts, not much is recorded about Gwenllian and Gruffydd at this time, but we know that they kept up continued raids against the Normans. In the same year they married, they captured Kidwelly Castle and captured or destroyed Carmarthen Castle. Around 1122, Gruffydd and Gwenllian's attacks had worn the nobility down enough that Gruffydd made peace with Henry I of England and was permitted to rule over a portion of his father's kingdom, Cantref Mawr, the seat of the princes of Deheubarth. However good this was in theory, in practice it was different, and the Norman nobility who had taken control of the surrounding areas soon put pressure on Gruffydd and he fled to exile in Ireland. While it's unknown exactly when he returned, it was before 1136 when events changed. Gwenllian was now in her late 30s and her husband was summoned to England for an audience with King Stephen, the new English monarch. Stephen had usurped the throne from the rightful claimant, his cousin Empress Matilda. She just happened to be female and stuck in Normandy due to pregnancy, and so was susceptible to having her crown taken by an able contestant. While we don't know the exact reasons why, Gruffydd refused to go. In the years Gwenllian had been fighting by her husband's side, her brothers back in Gwynedd had been expanding their father's kingdom by taking lands from the Normans. Around the same time Henry I made peace with Gwenllian and Gruffydd in 1122, he did the same with her father, Gruffydd ap Cynan. So in 1136, seeing an opportunity in the chaos caused by Stephen usurping the English throne, Gwenllian's brothers, Owain Gwynedd and Cadwaladr, joined forces with Prince Gruffydd. They raised a rebellion in Gwynedd, leaving Gwenllian back home in Deheubarth with her children. Unfortunately for Gwenllian, this would be both her proudest moment and her greatest tragedy. While her husband Gruffydd was away in Gwynedd trying to strike up an alliance with her father and fighting by the side of her brothers, nearby Norman nobles led by Maurice de Londres saw the opportunity to take, as they saw it, unguarded Deheubarth. Gwenllian, however, would not flee her family's lands. Instead, defying the traditions of a woman in a society dominated by men, Gwenllian set out to raise an army against the attacking Normans. As most of the trained Welsh forces had left with her husband, she was left with no choice but to rally her untrained countrymen. We can only imagine what passionate speech she gave that went unrecorded, but whatever Gwenllian said, it was enough to surge her forces on to the Battle of Cydweli. Gwenllian herself rode into battle at the head of her army, with her two older sons by her side, Morgan and Maelgwn. They were both just teenagers, and Gwenllian made sure her two younger sons and her daughters were safe elsewhere first. The two armies met in a field near Cydweli Castle, and the battle was said to have been a ferocious encounter. Gwenllian fought at the forefront of the conflict, demonstrating her fearlessness on the battlefield. But despite her valour, the Welsh forces were outnumbered, and Gwenllian was ultimately captured. This is where Gwenllian's story takes a heartbreaking turn. At this period of history, women were not really part of actual battles in any capacity, except perhaps in raising an army to free relatives, such as Queen Matilda for her husband King Stephen. In this, Gwenllian was a brave exception to the rule. Where women were involved in wars, they were usually treated somewhat more sympathetically than their male counterparts. Sadly for Gwenllian, she was not to be shown this leniency, and Maurice de Londres, perhaps smarting from having to fight against a woman, decided to make an example of her and accused her of treason. Her son Morgan was also slain, and her other son Maelgwn was captured. There on the battlefield, Gwenllian was brutally executed by the Normans by beheading, bringing an end to the life of a woman who had defied societal expectations and fought passionately for her homeland. But this was not the end of Gwenllian's story. Perhaps the Normans had hoped her death would be a warning, but when her husband Gruffydd found out about his wife's horrific death, He swore vengeance on the Norman occupiers and viciously attacked the English, Norman and Flemish residents in Deheubarth, burning their estates and properties and killing their livestock. In the autumn of that year, they gained a momentous victory over the Normans at Crugmawr near Cardigan, but Gwenllian's sacrifice for her country would never be forgotten, and she became a symbol of Welsh independence and defiance of both the Normans and traditional gender roles. As the centuries passed, Gwenllian's story would become obscured in the mists of history, but her legend would live on. She would continue to be a source of national pride for the Welsh people, and for centuries afterwards, men in battle would cry out, Diolchos Gwenllian, revenge for Gwenllian. One of her younger sons, Rhys ap Gruffydd, would go on to be known as the Lord Rhys, one of the most powerful and influential Welsh rulers of the early Middle Ages, and the dominant power in Wales after the death of his uncle Owain Gwynedd. She would even be remembered in a traditional Welsh ballad, Caniad Hen Gwenllian, or Gwenllian's Own Song, created by Melchior Brydydd, a bard at her father's court. Sleep, Gwenllian, my heart's delight, sleep on through shivering spear and brand, an apple rosy red within thy baby hand, by pillowed cheeks a pair of roses bright, thy heart as happy day and night. Mid all our woe, O vision rare, sweet little princess, cradled there, thy apple in thy hand, thy all of earthly care, thy brethren battle with the foe, thy sire's red strokes around him sweep, whilst thou, his bonny babe, art smiling through thy sleep. All Gwenllian shudders at the Norman blow. What are the angels whispering low of thy father now? Bright babe, asleep upon my knee, how many a queen of high degree would cast away her crown to slumber thus like thee. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any new documentaries.